My beloved Carmen, I begin this letter with a heavy heart, as I have been delaying it for such a long time. But now that I can hear the chariot of death draw nigh, I know I cannot wait any longer. Maybe this is not the most appropriate and honest way to discuss these things. But I'm not going to hide my weakness. I would have been unable to tell you all of this to your face. Of course, my secrecy is not without reason. Through it I have also avoided being held accountable. But if Father Perez and the others are right, I will soon be held responsible for my deeds and intentions by those in heaven. So how could I leave you unaware, the only true angel I know, my little daughter? I am guilty, my beautiful Carmen, guilty. Though the crime that others think I committed does no weigh so heavily on me as the fact that I forfeited your happiness to save my lousy life. I have been hiding a terrible secret, and I made an oath not to tell anyone while still alive. Thus the time has come to let you know, since I will no longer be living when you read these words. It all started when my friend Carlos was doing repairs in the church and happened upon a strange pair of keys attached to some window bars. Since he was very familiar with the tower's unopenable iron gate, he knew instantly that the double keys would fit the special lock. One day, his curiosity got the better of him. He snapped up the tower where he found a room and a strange machine untouched for centuries. This room is crammed with heretical documents and books on magic potions, witchcraft, spells, and alchemy. And there are designs for strange equipment, documents of Inquisition testimonies, formulas, spells, and a number of blasphemous pictures and objects. I myself have never been there, although Carlos invited me several times. But based on his account and what I saw of the objects from there, it must have been a trove of secrets. This peculiar collection must have been created and maintained by a curious and rather skillful monk, and perhaps some similarly bold followers of his, by saving or copying some documents before they were cast into the fire together with their writers. According to the documents, the church had already been completed around 1500, so the priests may have been guarding the secret for several generations, when finally, one day, they must have found no proper successor, and the great iron door was shut forever. My dearest daughter, at that time the three of us, all the same age, were very good friends. Carlos Candelas, the swordsmith, Alonso Garcia de la Rica, the politician, and myself, the artist, back from England. We had always been very different from one another, but there was also always a connection between us based on our shared childhood memories, just as on our love for mysticism. We often met just to talk. Alonso talked about his experiences in Mexico. I myself amused them with stories from England. Carlos, however, felt that the uneventful life in Toledo didn't give him much to talk about. It was about this time when he discovered the room in the tower, and then he began taking one piece or another from the collection, starting with books and writings. To be honest, we were thrilled by the discovery. No one was interested in stories of the past any longer. We were only contemplating the unknown working principle of the world, devouring the secret literature, and came to believe more and more that the mysterious guardians of the Tower collection had been reborn in us, and it was our duty to understand and increase this knowledge. It was at Easter, precisely 14 years ago, that, putting aside our Christian upbringing and stronger or weaker faiths, we founded the secret society, Different Sun, based on the title of an unusual book. We convened from time to time and had discussions or conducted experiments, but we were afraid to meet in the tower. It would have been too close to all those who reject other worldviews, and then it could have been dangerous for people who had rarely attended to appear in the church. We never denied God, but we were mesmerized by the forbidden ideas. Our interest in experimenting grew, and the fact that we had such extraordinary thoughts gave us a sense of freedom. We felt that all that we knew about man, Christianity, and the world appeared in a different light. We devoted ourselves to the books and magic like children to new toys. I was especially drawn to alchemy and similar processes, as I had become more and more familiar with chemistry through my interest in photography. Carlos was interested in magic and necromancy, and Alonso in writings that explained biblical events in different ways or told of unexplainable phenomena. Readings, debates, and discussions related to these topics took many nights. The library in the tower proved to be an inexhaustible source. One day, however, Alonso received news that a Mexican consul was retiring, and he saw a chance to apply for the office. His heart's desire was to live in Central America. What is more, he had missed a similar chance, and it was always hard on him when he lost. Some years ago, however, his brother-in-law became a member of the commission that decided on appointments like this. He trusted that he would make it to Mexico through his wife and connections, and that, as his health allowed, he would be able to spend at least 10 to 15 years in the eternal sunlight of his beloved second home. Carlos and I were sorry that he wanted to leave us, but we understood his wishes, desires, and feelings, so naturally, as his good friends, we supported him. When the time came, Alonso harnessed the horses in the afternoon and set out for Madrid. That day, he attended a family dinner in the company of the influential brother-in-law, and the next day, the hearing of his case would come, for which he had to appear in person. He was very excited. He regretted that his wife was not there, as she had caught a cold and was lying in bed with a temperature. In the evening, Carlos suddenly knocked at my door. He suggested we go to our secret meeting place, and our society, Different Sun, should have a special meeting. He knew a black magic spell that could remove the immediate obstacles from our friend's path. I must say I was enthusiastic about the idea, and I went along with him. We cast a very complex spell in which we cursed the factors that were hindering Alonso's travel to Mexico. Trusting in our success and our friend's gratitude, we described the ritual in a letter which we sent to our designated secret message place in the Garcia de la Rica Palace that night. We were waiting for the effects to take place. Alonso returned home the next night earlier than expected and agitatedly rattled at my door. Maybe you remember, my dear. He lost his temper and was shouting and kept repeating that both of us were murderers, me and Carlos, and he will avenge all of our outrageous deeds. I had great difficulty getting him to explain why he was so mad. He said he was leaving for the early afternoon meeting from his lodging in Madrid when someone brought him the news that his brother-in-law had died suddenly during the night. The meeting was postponed, and Alonso thought the opportunity had been lost and traveled home, deeply upset. Once home, he was met with another disaster. Hugo, the butler, told him that Mrs. Alma Garcia de la Rica, the lady of the house, his beloved spouse, had died of a high fever during the night. Alonso collapsed, but soon he was overcome by rage, which I witnessed. He ran away shouting, and I remained there stunned by the terrible news. I ran immediately to Carlos, who felt similarly affected by the events. It was not only our friend's double tragedy, for which we felt deep sadness, but the responsibility also weighed heavily on our hearts. As Alonso may have been right, our magic killed both innocent people. But how could this be so? Because we wanted to remove the obstacle from his journey to Mexico? We were not thinking of people, no one's death, least of all that of the brother-in-law who wanted to help, or the warm-hearted Mrs. Alma Garcia de la Rica. Perhaps we made a mistake, or perhaps they, the people close to Alonso, were hindering the nomination? Maybe this was all just coincidence. The thin relative from Madrid was really a victim of a heart attack, and his wife took pneumonia too lightly. I will never find it out. Perhaps it is not important. It is a fact that had our letter been used as proof, if Alonso had turned in his old friends, both of us would have been executed without further question. He broke all relations with us, became a merciless and bitter man, and broke down under the tragedy. I remember he went gray in days, and he sent away everyone from the house except Hugo. We knew he did and did not believe in magic, and if he believed that the magic was successful, it must have been his family and his own wife who wanted to prevent him from realizing his dreams. Therefore, it was not entirely unexpected that instead of a letter from the police, we received a message from him inviting us to a meeting in the palace garden. He was cool and made a blackmail offer to both of us in a manner that made us feel he wouldn't take no for an answer. We had to decide in 1 week's time. Either we accept the foreseeable consequences of a police report, or we give him our dearest possessions. He stated exactly what he demanded. From Carlos, the servitude of his son Francisco, and a sword, the last work of the famous blade master Juan Candelas. And from me, my house after my death, and your hand, my child, for his son. We were forced to say yes. I gave you as a deposit, and I will never forgive myself for that. I can only say on my behalf that if I had said no, then I would have taken my friend Carlos with me to death, and you would soon have been an orphan. So within 1 week's time, we signed the contract, and Carlos handed the valuable sword over. Years went by, and one day I found out that Eugenio, the only Garcia de la Rica descendant whom you are forced to marry, my dear Carmen, intended to leave for Mexico to gain experience. It was no secret that he was going in order to fulfill his father's dream. Then I went to visit Alonso, and to my surprise, he agreed to see me in his house. I was begging for concessions. I did not want you to travel to Mexico against your will. It seemed perhaps seeing his son's political career, that his heart was lighter. We amended the agreement with the condition that if I find a husband who can pay him the value of the house and do this before you, my daughter, turn 21, he will not make you his daughter-in-law. This, however, was only conditional success, since I knew, on the one hand, how difficult it would be to find such a rich husband for you in just a couple of years, and on the other hand, I saw that love was budding between you and the young Candelas. Carlos, my eternal friend, who has left us meanwhile, asked me in his dying words to do everything so that you could get married, since you love each other as beautifully as two doves. You see, here I am, powerless and helpless in trying to free you from your terrible position. To help you get married with kind Francisco as a continuation and fulfillment of your father's sacred friendship. All I have is this music box with my favorite song and the course of my life that will perhaps serve as a lesson for you, my beautiful daughter, with its successes and mistakes, because great things also happened to your restless father. There were 3 main periods in my life. The first one consists of those strange 15 years that I spent in England, where I got to know your unfortunate mother. The second important period washed away the first, since you were born, and everything changed with that. I started a new life in my hometown when we came back to Toledo. The third one, however, started with a seal on a friendship and worldview with the creation of the society Different Sun, and it finished in a few years. Naturally, Carlos and I voted to dissolve the society the day after the tragedy. And since then, it seems that it has left us alone. Although I am sure I'm not the only one of the 3 of us who is tortured by strange dreams and doubts, even after all these years. My beautiful child, please forgive your weak father's sins. It is not nice to admit, but your forgiveness is much more important to me than whatever the Almighty Court up there decides. Do not give up hope. Do not give up on your feelings. But be wise and always decide in favor of life. An old and tortured heart bids you farewell. Your father.